Hi, Eric. Welcome back.
Hey, welcome.
I just learned reading your article that you had in a peak time 5 transactions per second.
Yep.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's back in those days, it took some work. Uh, I was running a single instance of Apache with Tomcat behind it, uh, using a lot of caching help. That's what helped the most.
Mhm.
I mean, overall, when you think about it, the link blog is pretty much, a blog or link blog is probably much static.
Mhm.
Even though the information may be stored in a database, most of it is pretty static. So where the issue comes into play is when you have parameters added to a query.
Mhm.
Uh, and there was nothing like Redis or anything of the sort that can help with that kind of stuff at the time. So I did find, which I think it was called OS Cache. It was
Mhm.
a JSP tag library. I think it was made by Atlassian, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong on that. And and it was nice because it allowed you to cache a segment of the page, not just you could cache an entire page, of course,
Mhm.
which I would do, for example, for the RSS feed. Makes sense. RSS feed I modified each time you make a new post, so
Mhm.
there's no there's
Mhm.
no query associated with it or whatever. It just displays text. Well, XML in this case, but um, and so I started using that. And ultimately, by the time things like Hibernate and so forth came around, my traffic had come down. So there was no longer a need for
Why
me
your
to,
traffic come down?
because I stopped the blog after the link blog after 7 years.
Mhm.
From that point on, I was more of a sporadic blogger. So even though to this day I'm still getting a fair amount of traffic, it just left over a lot of RSS feed readers and things like that. Um, so that's basically what the reason was, as it started basically
Mhm.
on its own, just dying just because of lack of content.
How much time you spent with the blog at peak time daily?
So it was not that much. As I talked in the previous
Mhm.
segment, I was using the new Scroller application and I was using the Blogger slash Weblog
Mhm.
API. So it just required me. So I was reading at the peak time. I think I was reading about 1,600 feeds,
Yeah.
and but I wasn't really reading them. First thing is to scan through the subject
Mhm.
and look at the stuff that seem of interest. And from that point, I just did basically just like I would create a new post on my blog,
Mhm.
and I had a few macros in there, so I could just take the URL, the title, it would grab that automatically, and just a little macro for the. I had little icons that indicated the category, Java, web, things like that. And so I think overall throughout the day, it was no more than an hour.
Okay.
I tried to update twice a day usually.
Mhm.
So it wasn't. I mean, I never considered it to be work because it was something I was doing anyway.
Mhm.
uh, as I said before, I think the whole concept about the link blog is that I needed a place to bookmark things for
Mhm.
myself,
Mhm.
and I just figured that well, maybe other people would like that too.
Nice. Mhm.
And that there was no expectation of huge traffic or anything. That's not what I was going after at all. That just came on its own.
Mhm.
Uh,
So, and what's today, what interests me is, the transition from your JSP technology to Rife, right?
Yeah, so when just I mean I knew of Geert before, but we've never actually contacted. We knew of each other, but
Geert is his name.
Geert, yeah, okay. And I we knew the same people and so forth. So he made some kind of announcement about I think it was Rife,
Mhm.
and for some reason at the time I was looking at the URL encoder class in Java, which is a mess, and it's just not when you use it, you just you have to use it to decode. Nothing else will decode properly. I think I was on Mastodon or Twitter. I just sent him a text. I'm like, hey, I noticed that you're using URL
When was
encoder.
it? When was it roughly?
Probably about a year and a half ago, I would
Okay.
say. Yeah, not that long ago. Maybe 2 years, but probably a year and a half.
Which trouble you had with the decoder?
Well, the encoder, the trouble that I have with it is it's nothing else can decode it properly. It does some mishmash of various RFC encoding, contrary to like the URI encoder and decoders in Android or in Spring or whatever do things, in my opinion, the right way. For example, the pluses, for spaces and so forth. If you use that using the URL encoder, you are not going to be able to decode it properly using Spring or just about anything else. It doesn't even have to be Java. So we kind of got on that, and I took it upon myself so he made changes to his code, and I took it upon myself to make a Kotlin version of it, and then he decided to make.
When you started to use Kotlin?
Oof, that's a good question. Pretty early on. I started using it really a lot when I started involved with Cedric, and we were working on that Cobalt build system.
And why you did this?
Well, I've known Cedric for years. I mean, years. And I saw that he had this little project, and my constant annoyance with Maven and Gradle.
How you met Cedric? Because I also knew Cedric from different angle because of EGB Doclet and BA work, right? So this is why.
Yeah, I think I've started. I think we hooked up when he was still working at BA. Both being French, kind of gave us a connection. I'm not quite sure exactly what prompted, but we've been talking a lot off and on for years.
Okay.
Not always about programming. And so I've always keep an eye on what he's doing. I always find it interesting, and I saw that he was working on this build system. So I'm like, hey, do you have plugins? And not really at the time. So kind of worked and started making a bunch of plugins for it. And
why said it didn't knew about that? Why he built his own build tool?
So I think originally it was the same issue that we currently have, is that he felt that you could have something that would be a lot simpler to use. And don't forget, at the time there was no Kotlin support in Gradle, right? So not only would they wanted to use Kotlin, but he wanted also something simple, which is different from the build tool that we're working on, because he actually went the fully automated way, where you just issue one command and it pretty much does everything, all the sub steps on its own. So his idea was for TestNG, for example. He got so tired of having those Gradle build file all over the place, those sub project that made, that he wanted something I just need to build the damn thing, And so I think that was his original motivation. It got a little bit of traction at first. There was problems, including the fact that he was using the Kotlin compiler, which wasn't really documented very well. So each time there was a change to the compiler, it would break. Ultimately, it didn't pick up any steam, and the project is dormant at this point. I mean, I think nowadays with Kotlin support directly into Gradle, there's probably less of a need for it. So yeah, so that's basically when I started really getting into doing Kotlin stuff. I mean, I had done some stuff, but nothing.
Only because you are interested in the build tool. This was your.
Yeah, and I got an appreciation for Kotlin just working with it. Often.
But why you start? Because for me, I have to say Java is productive enough, so I don't have even the need to try something different. So
well, I was exactly in the same spot that you were, and I didn't think. I looked at Kotlin, I'm like, hey, it's cool. I looked at Kotlin like I look at Groovy, and I'm like, yeah, but it's cool.
Yeah.
There was something called Bean Shell before that. I'm like, yeah, that's
Exactly.
cool. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. And play a little bit with it, and it's like, But when I started getting actually to use it,
Mhm.
then I started seeing the benefit.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, uh, and I started to really like it. And so for years after that, that's mostly what I did was Kotlin,
Okay.
until I hooked up with Yurt. Is that it?
Hit.
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 Okay. And then well, we're gonna call him G.
Mr. G.
Yeah, G. And then we he got me back kind of in the Java frame of mind. And
But what you did in Kotlin, you did for yourself or projects actually?
yeah, I mean, I have a lot of GitHub projects, little things, little library, little support
Okay.
for this and that. It's mostly open source stuff. By that time, I didn't really have any customers that were,
Mm-hmm.
ready to use Kotlin. And then when the cancer hit, I kind of dropped all the commercial stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and just did,
Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to get back to be able to actually do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and when I hooked up with him, Rife being an entirely Java based, product. And so to track back a little, when I started looking at Rife, there was one thing that really,
But the how to call it? The trigger was the URL encoder, right?
yes, it was.
This is how
Yeah,
you met Hert or
yeah,
met.
and
Yeah.
yeah. This is why we actually physically started to talk, and
Yeah.
then I started looking into Rife,
Mhm.
or Rife 2 in this case.
But why this? Because you need a replacement for your JSPs. But why?
No, no, that was not my goal at all. I just I was not familiar with the framework,
Mhm.
and I wanted to look at it, and I'm like, well, there's stuff that I like. I like the fact that it's got no dependency. I like the fact that it runs on 2 MB, just a 2 MB jar. So I like all of that because for years I've been, wanted somewhat to get away from the JSP. And each time I was looking at Spring or whatever framework, I was looking at a lot of bloat. And I did not like that. I'm like, I don't need all that, stuff. And I don't need.
But I would say JSP, there were lots of lightweight servlet containers back then for
Yep.
JSPs, right? So there was no need to. I mean, JSP was the light.
Exactly. I mean, and so when I was looking at framework, there was nothing that was compelling for
Yeah.
me to switch to it. There was too many drawbacks
Yeah.
and not enough pluses.
Do you remember
So
back then there were like there were performance test comparison between frameworks. So there was Ruby and Java and whatever, and JSPs always won. So like the servlets and JSPs was like this was the it couldn't be reached, the performance. And if you took what happened behind the scenes, because it was basically string concatenation, very efficient one, and they always won. So servlets and JSPs was the peak. .NET, exactly. There was .NET comparison, with JSPs and Ruby and everything, and for and JSPs and servers were unbeatable back then.
yeah, and that's part of the reason why. I mean, not really. I mean, I got onto JSP really early on before there was any frameworks like Struts.
JHTML, the JHTML time,
Oh yeah. I mean, so it just it was a normal progression for me.
Mhm.
And as I said, we developed a library that was very similar to what Struts or JSTL would do
Mhm.
before those two existed, just as a need, because we needed that for our customers to be able to customize their stores on their own. So and over the years, I mean, I ran the blog on JSP for 23 years, so not a small amount of time.
Mhm.
I just when I looked at framework, it just never hit the right note.
Mhm.
And so when I looked at Rife, I was very skeptical because I was like, well, it sounds good, but really, what's the catch?
And why it sound good to you? Just because no dependencies to Max? This was
no dependency. I kind of like what I read. It has a lot of documentation and the stuff I kind of liked. And it seems like it was let me compare it to when I started using an IDE with Java. I was using Eclipse, right? And then I tried IntelliJ IDE, right? And I did not like it. And the reason I did not like it is because I had to look for things. Under Eclipse, it worked more the way I was used to it. I know I would go on the file, I could select preferences, things like that. And under IntelliJ IDEA, I always had to look for things. So for the longest time, I didn't use it. Nowadays, that's all I use. But and I think that was the problem with Spring. First of all, I'm not a big fan of MVC at all. Model View Controller, I'm not a big fan at all. I've never been a big fan. I think it's it's a production nightmare. But anyway, JSP on that aspect to me is a lot easier to maintain. So when I looked at the documentation, there was a lot of things that were hitting the right notes. And so I'm like, I still don't know, right? So I went on the Discord channel and hooked up with, the G-Man and start grilling him. Basically, I'm like, I'm not gonna do any work. I'm gonna have him answer questions. It's like, and so I got to the point where I was like, it's gonna work. So I spent about a weekend converting my blog. And there was a little bit more work after that. There was a few things that we had to work out. But overall, I've been really, really pleased with the end result. It just actually it gave me an opportunity to clean up 23 years worth of code, which I'd never done really, because it's like, I'm kind of like, if it works, why fix it, right? I mean, it's just like that's just causing problem. But over the years, there's a bunch of APIs that got dropped, a bunch of things that are no longer in use. So it gave me an opportunity to clean that up pretty easily. Actually, I was able to extract the main functionality, put in, and it was already mostly servlet and things like that. So it was pretty easy. And I just had to switch the templating to using, Rife's templating, which is so much better than embedded JSPs in your
Why?
document. It's just flawless. I mean, it's just he's got a very simple yet very powerful way of doing repeating blocks and things like that. So it took me. That's probably the thing that took me the longest to grasp, because it's not your standard. Like, it's not time leaf. It's not. It's not that kind of a framework, or was it velocity, or you remember that?
Yeah. Hey, velocity is a big deal. You know why? You know where it is loose? I think the velocity is the most popular templating engine ever, and everyone uses velocity.
Really? I thought most people had moved to use like time leaf or something like
no,
that.
but even non-Java developers are using velocity like crazy.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
You know where?
Yeah, I mean, and so
we know where it is used a lot.
Where?
HTTP API gateway at Amazon, AWS.
Oh, yeah.
It is the entire how the I'm pretty sure it's velocity. It is how the HTTP headers are extracted. All the routing is, everything is velocity, and this is I would say, it's not that like Java developers are using this. Is Python, Node.js. Everyone has to use velocity, and this is they even call it VTL. So I'm pretty sure this is velocity. So this is yeah. So you have to take a look at the HTTP API gateway documentation from AWS, and this is velocity actually.
I kind of thought people had moved to like time leaf or mustache or something like that, but
Mustache is also very old, right? So this is
but they all work on they all work on the same principle.
What's the main difference between a for loop and Mr. G template engine?
How would I put it? It's he's got this concept of blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically, it's like a Lego thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you just put blocks together. So you don't specifically, uh, your original template is very basic because
Mm-hmm.
it's only has block. A little bit, if you look at the HTML document, you would have, the head,
Mm-hmm.
the body, the footer,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff, and all of those are inserted as blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just move things around as needed. You make them, you show them, you don't show them, and you fill in variables within those blocks as needed. So you can either repeat the same block really easily or change
How
the
the
same.
how the repetition is working? That's
Uh,
if
it's
I have a list item, for instance, I have
Yeah,
OL and I have a list item inside, and I would like just to
yeah.
print numbers
Okay.
from an array. Very simple.
Yes. So basically, he's using a bean. He's got his own bean factory,
Mm-hmm.
and you pass that to the template, and it will do the legwork for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to do that, if you can still do it manually, but it's pretty easy. It was pretty easy for me to take basically my database, uh,
Mm-hmm.
how do you call it, a schema, and turn it into a class,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a class that has basically just getters and setters. That's it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And basically he fills that information in, and you can add little modification, like if you always need to be modifying that information a certain way, you can add that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty straightforward as far as I think 99.9% of the stuff is mapped to a class. There's a few things, very few things that I did manually, where I just do like a single query. And same thing, the query can be mapped to anything, to any object that you want,
Mm-hmm.
including, so depending on what you have in your, what comes back in your query, you can map all of that pretty straightforwardly to your template
Mm-hmm.
and reuse it as needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was definitely different than the way I was doing it.
So if you
Uh,
have you would have a block like a item is a block item,
hmm?
and then the bean will repeat the block item for you, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the bean will repeat the item if the item is a map or a a list or whatever. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not, then the item won't get repeated. You know.
Okay, so if the bean has, if there's some iterable, then it is going to be repeated. The
Yep.
block otherwise is not going to be repeated.
Exactly.
And if there's an iterable, and in the iterable you have a class with getters and setters, you can access probably the properties in the block.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So basically, when once you load the template, you can load variables values
Mm-hmm.
in that template,
Mm-hmm.
and the smart portion of that is that you can also kind of have global things,
Mm-hmm.
that are loaded all the time. For example, if you load a page, your header is most likely going to have a lot of information. Same like your script section, for example, is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you can turn all those sections into individual templates
Mm-hmm.
and just include it
Mm-hmm.
in whatever page layout you're trying to do. So
Mm-hmm.
you're just taking blocks and moving them around as
Mm-hmm.
needed.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be a little smart on how you set up your blocks so they are reusable,
Mm-hmm.
instead of having blocks that are just
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it's just like a puzzle. You
Mm-hmm.
just move things around.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's a tough concept to explain, and it's a tough concept for me, was a tough concept to fully understand.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that I had is that really the what would I say, the it's hard to understand when you read it.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to get your hands dirty and try it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's basically what the problem is. I mean, we've been working on improving the documentation, but it's as I'm kind of struggling explaining it to you, is exactly the same problems that we have explaining it in documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other hand, when you start trying it and you start understanding what the small samples do, it just opens up a whole new set
Mhm.
of possibility in your mind.
I had already chatted with Herd about the templates, and these were bidirectional templates,
Yep.
And I have to say, you and he made me curious, and I will try it. I usually have absolute no interest in proprietary frameworks because they
Sure.
die, right?
Yeah.
But
Yes.
how Herd explained it and how you explain it, it sounds interesting, and I like things which are completely different. I don't like things which are similar, so I'm not completely not interested. But this is maybe just I have actually no need for now, but it's an actually interesting small thing to try out. Yeah, why not? And I don't know whether you listened to the episode with Herd, but the funny story is that I heard a podcast in 2006, I think, about Rife back then,
Yep.
and I remember the name. And this is how I met actually Herd, right? So this was
Yeah.
this is even crazier story because it's stick in my mind. This Rife, the name, and and the reactive portion was interesting to me, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it to me what was impressive. First of all, not to toot his horn, but the code is absolutely fantastic.
Mhm.
His code is so readable. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just, it's
And the
it's.
documentation is crazy. I took a look at the code, and he writes. I don't know how he does that, but everything is well documented with Javadoc. And I mean, he had to spend hours. I don't know whether he types so fast or how it is possible.
And you see the amount of tests that he has.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just like I don't know how he does it, to tell the truth.
Mhm.
But he must have macros or something,
Or
because
he outsourced everything, to someone.
yeah,
He's the big manager, and
yeah,
hundreds of developers are working for him.
I know he's got a guy in Russia that does that
Yeah,
stuff for
yeah,
him.
exactly.
Now, and so the thing that to me that was um, really eye opening is the more I converted the blog,
Mhm.
the easier it got,
Mhm.
and the more it started matching my original vision,
Mhm.
and I mean the maintenance on this thing is nothing.
Mhm.
I dependency once in a while, I had new features once in a while. There was actually a lot more maintenance involved with the JSP.
Mhm.
And it's just suddenly and made this like huge code base that I had, right?
Mhm.
23 years worth of code. Can you imagine? It's got everything, right?
Mhm.
And so I was able to compact that in a lot smaller section. I was
Mhm.
able to basically take all my years of experience and put it into it, and it just fit right into Rives.
Mhm.
I didn't. I mean, I didn't have to do much. I have a few utility classes, and everything else kind of like is templates
Mhm.
and that's about it. It's pretty amazing how it took that humongous code base and turn it into something that's lean
Mhm.
and mean.
Mhm.
And that, to me, that was beautiful.
Mhm.
That's why I really got into it. When I started getting into it, it's just like I didn't stop. I worked like 2 days nonstop, because it's just like the more I was getting into it, oh, I could do this and I could do that, and it's just like
And what
it's like
about the IDE syntax highlighting? No problem.
no problem. It's straight Java. I mean,
Templates and with the front end.
yeah, the template. He's got an extension for IntelliJ IDEA, but I don't think it works anymore.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I'm old school, man. I used to do HTML by hand.
No,
To
yeah,
me,
me as well. So I use Visual Studio
yeah,
Code for right now, so it's
yeah,
just
yeah. So it just the templating is so easy. It's so simple. That
syntax highlighting would be nice.
yeah. I mean, it did have that, but I don't know. I think the extension for the no longer works with the newer version. I'm not quite sure if it got fixed or not.
Mhm.
But it's not been a big issue for me. But I have to tell you something, is that so I've been running this for over a year now,
Mhm.
and literally I really haven't had to change much of the logic. I
Mhm.
may have to make modification to the HTML,
Mhm.
but I really haven't had, and I've added new features which are backend features, so they don't have a UI. or a very basic UI, but I really haven't had to change like even variable names or anything of the sort. Which, trust me, I've had to do a lot of that when I was doing the JSP stuff. And I'm kind of like the person that I don't let a lot of project dies, right? So it's like I read about this new technology, I try it, this new thing, and then boom, I'm like, oh, I should put that in the blog, I should put that in this, I should put that in that, So it's just like, so I always update, the active stuff. That's just the way I operate. I always spend a lot of time looking for new things. When I was doing a lot of consulting, I would spend probably about 3 months a year, at least, just getting up to speed. Not take any, just a few customers, not a lot of work, and just to look at new technology. You look at new things like when Ruby on Rails came out, and look at that. Look at things like that. To see what's available out there, and what I can use and what I cannot use. Ruby on Rails was one of the things that I dismissed pretty quickly. But
I try, as it came out, I tried to do a project, and which was not documented, whatever, that I remember. The tables had to be in plural. So you had to name, not customer, but customers.
Yep.
And I didn't knew that. And it didn't work. And I said, you're crazy. I try, to make it work. It's like, why it doesn't work? It was supposed to be simple. And the next thing is, I used a database, and there was no driver for the database or something. This was basic, I think Postgres or whatever, and it was impossible. They only supported MySQL or something. And I say, you're all crazy. And then I went back to Java, and it worked with whatever, because I knew Java, but still, I was a little bit disappointed because I was so curious about Ruby back then, Rails, and was completely disappointed. But still, I like the appeal, the syntax, the design ideas, and the entire marketing. I really appreciated that, but the technology, I was disappointed. And then even didn't have transactions. They couldn't write consistently back. This was a bit crazy.
And I had exactly the same experience. To me, Ruby on Rails is a nice, a lot of keywords, a lot of nice features listed, but the implementation, on the other hand, is not that great.
Active records and migration with good ideas, right? And
I don't know what you're thinking, but I kind of have the same feeling about PHP. Because PHP got really big at some point. And I always looked at PHP as being spaghetti code.
This interesting part is lots of PHP developers attended my workshops, and they were Java, Java-E, microprofile.
Okay.
And after one day, they were delighted. They said, this is great. And what they were very impressed with connection pools in JDBC. So if showed on them that, wow, you have something like, the connection pools was the first we got, and they liked everything. Actually, and it was not easy because I used dependency injection. I just used JAX-RS, so it was not like Hello World Java. It's more advanced course, but I never got actually bad feedback from PHP developers, which also made me think, because it's like, what I showed is actually enterprise Java, and it was supposed to be, complex and bloated and whatever. And I got the opposite feedback from PHP developers. And by the way, having said that, what's interesting is the entire time, two perspectives, right? Because you were more like, full stack, and I was business developer more or less, because I used Java deeply, but the servers were run by my clients.
So I did a lot of that too.
But the interesting part is, if you consider this from this perspective, then I only had the war, right? And the war was basically empty, because I fully relied on the Java-E API. So my wars were like 100K, 200K. People say, this is impossible. What are you doing? Why is it so small? Why is it so fast? Because I didn't have any dependencies. So the interesting is what you are explaining here, and my impressions, my entire developer work was, I didn't like dependencies at all, because I have to update them, care about them. I was too lazy. So I said, if I have the application server, I just pick the Java EE API, and anything else I don't use. So I would just pick, or I would drop the server, no problem. Either I use the server or I don't use the server. So there is nothing in between. And this was the best decision ever because I had, to learn the entire Java EE, and I learned it once and never again. So for 20 years, it never changed actually a lot. So it was lots of vacations for me, and the speed of development and productivity were actually great if you use the conventions. If you could live with it. For instance, Maven, my build system, no plugins. I have exactly one plugin for the war creation and nothing else. I in my code reviews, I let delete all the plugins, the EJB plugins. I don't know even what it did. Just one war and done. I remember my POMs were maybe 50 lines of code mostly.
Wow.
Just Java, nothing else. And people ask me about Gradle. It's like, Gradle is too complicated. I just use Maven. I just do Maven package and I'm done, right? Yeah. And this is the interesting part. So I also noticed this in Inherit. You're also mentioning no dependencies. I was the same, but from complete different angle and perspective. But if I would have, to install WebSphere and done it, I would be no interested. So it's just like serverless. So my clients run, the servers. I never cared about the servers. I just installed the same server on my machine. And usually Glassfish. So Glassfish I use a lot, and Payara and Whitefly. And BA until 8. 8 was great, and then later it will became bloated. So I stopped. Yeah. But yeah, just because the interesting, considerations, no dependencies. And yeah.
Have you ever played with the Oracle stuff where Java is embedded into the server directly?
The project Aurora on your database?
Yeah.
Yes. This was the Aurora. This is a long time ago. What you could do, you could write stored procedures in Java, and you could run Java in the Oracle database. It was Oracle database 8i, and a little bit later something. This was, and I evaluated this for a big company in Germany, and work with it, and it was tough. We didn't use it in production. And back then it was, and then it just, I don't know whether it died, but it was not that popular back then.
It got really complicated. Yeah. In my opinion, I think conceptually it was a great idea. One environment, right, that's got everything you need. But just like every single Oracle except for MySQL, which they own now, but every single Oracle database that I work with usually comes with an engineer that just has the DBM stuff. Because it's just not, it's not, I would say it's not approachable just as a hobbyist or it's I've never really, when I hear Oracle, I'm like, hey, I'll interact just like you. I'll interact with your database, but I'm not doing any database work at all. If I need a new table, I'll tell you to create it, and that's it.
But I didn't use the thing. So, for instance, the Oracle databases, I liked Oracle because the database were really fast, and I was impressed by the speed. But I never wanted to be dependent on the Oracle database. I always used JDBC, right? And I was already suspicious if there was some Oracle data type I didn't like that. So I would like to have a straight JDBC and make the database swappable if possible. But about the application server, so what I used is I started with Sun Java Web Server, which was actually very lean for that time. Then Tomcat a bit, and then the application server started. And there are lots of great application servers. BA was stellar back then. BA, there was WebLogic, one jar. This basically what it was for the server, for the client. It started, they had everything, from automation in JMX, Python. They had, it was a nice console with visual, monitoring. And this is how the first time I stumbled upon Cedric, because he created the EGB Docklet tool, which I use a lot. Later it became Xdocklet, and I used it for generation of the XML, which I hated. And then Orion Server came. I don't know whether you remember. Orion Server was a Swedish, two students created a server, very lean one. So I used this in some projects. Then Whitefly, of course, came out, and then Glassfish. And Glassfish was interesting because this was the reference implementation. and was also supported by Sun, which was
Yeah.
from the business perspective great, because I told my clients, look, we can start with Glassfish. And if you like, you can buy support. You don't have to, but this is the reference implementation. It was a great business model. And this is what I did all the time with no dependencies, basically. So I told my client, if we commit to use Glassfish, then Glassfish is the platform, nothing else. If we now commit to Whitefly, we'll pick Whitefly. We try, it's your decision. We can buy, contract by JBoss, later Red Hat, or not. But I didn't like to mix things. And this is why I didn't use Spring a lot, because Spring the support was a little bit strange. You had to buy the Tomcat, TCAT, specific from Spring. And they used a lot of XML and then praised the XML. And I didn't like the XML. I wanted to generate XML with the tool from Cedric, So for me, also, why I should write XML by hand. I never got the concept why I should have an interface, one implementation, and then, write in XML that the interface implementation belong together. So for me, it was like, so I couldn't get the concept that you have to maintain three things, right? So this was.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I can relate to a lot of the stuff that you're saying, it's just, I never understood why there's always this need to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
You got something like J2EE, and I mean, what you were talking about is like, Spring, you had to use Tomcat EE for a while, things. And if you look at the mess now with the, J2EE, that's now Jakarta EE, with no backward compatibility. I mean, I guess they have tools that can convert your classes. It's
control
just
space, control R is replace and rename. This is not. You have to replace Java X with Jakarta, and you're basically
done. And all the Sun packages have been removed. There's no longer Sun dot and so forth. That just show you how important those APIs are. And it's just like, if it's there, use it. Don't. And that was kind of, try to get back on the topic. That was kind of my thing with Rife, is as I was moving along, I'm like, oh, look at that. He's got a string to do conversion. He's got a thing, he's got this there. Like, oh, I need to encode this in HTML. I need to encode this in UTF. He's got all of that. He's got all that stuff built in. So suddenly I'm getting rid of my own stuff and just using what's already in, the server. So kind of like trying to get to somewhat a point where I'm reducing my amount of dependency. I've been really reluctant, for example, of using the Apache Commons, right?
Yeah.
Not because it's not great. It's because there's too many dependency. If you want to use this, you have to use .lang. You have to use this. It's like, it's not just including one library, right? It uses this, it uses that. And it's just like, before you know it, you got 15 things that are loaded, and you just need one function.
Yeah.
Right.
It's empty.
I know.
It's empty.
Like,
this is the
And so I think, I don't know for sure, but I think that's what the G-Man was doing. Is he was like, why should I include this stuff? It takes me like 10 lines of code to write the same thing. Oh yeah, people say, well, it's code duplication. Why it's not if you don't include it.
Yes.
If you don't take on the inclusion, then it's not a problem. So ultimately the experience, and don't get me wrong, there was some moment where Rife fought me really hard. And in retrospect, I think that was mostly my fault. I was hard-headed and stubborn. I wanted to do it the way I'm used to do it. And that didn't really fit in the way Rife works. And in talking with him on the Discord chat, we got some of those issues worked out pretty easily, which turned out to me into making my first library for Rife. I had a bunch of encoding and bunch of different things, so that he didn't have. So I just created a library that's got a bunch of creating QR codes and things like that.
Oh, cool.
So that's how I got started. Being really involved in the project. Just because I was looking at it.
And you stopped to love Kotlin.
Yeah, I haven't done, except for little maintenance stuff. I haven't written anything in Kotlin in a year and a half.
And what's because now you have Java 21, I guess, right? You're working with Java 21?
It's not that. I am working with only 21. It's just like when I started going back to doing Java all the time,
Mhm.
it's just like I went back to like and met that old friend I haven't seen in a long time.
Mhm.
There was a familiarity to it. And I just suddenly didn't feel like, well, I'm not saving that much time using Kotlin,
Mhm.
right? And I just as the more as I got to do it, the more it's like, I've been doing this a long time. I like it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is what I don't understand, because I mean, I cannot imagine that if I would use Kotlin, I would be faster. So this is what or on.
You can. Yeah, I mean, I think just like everything else in programming,
Mhm.
the first step is choosing the right tool
Mhm.
for what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
I've worked with so many companies over the years that are completely reluctant to change.
Mhm.
They will do everything that they can to keep the same technology. They don't want to change. I equate it to patching a flat tire. You keep on patching it instead of replacing it. At
Mhm.
one point, you're not going to go very far.
Mhm.
And I've seen that many, many times. Java is great. It fits a lot of needs, but sometimes it's not the right tool.
Mhm.
Kotlin is an extension of Java.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people look at Kotlin and they just look at the macro kind of functionality, right? The ability to overwrite a function and add an additional function to it. If you like the string class and it
But
doesn't do
what are you
something.
missing in Kotlin? Are you missing something, or I mean, this is impossible because
Right now, I'm not. That's what I'm saying. That's why I've not got back to Kotlin. The only reason I did the Kotlin plugin for BLD for build is because I had so many projects in Kotlin and I didn't want to use Gradle to compile them.
Mhm.
And that has been my only, and that's written in Java, by the way, the
Mhm.
plugin itself, not in Kotlin.
Mhm.
So that's the only reason I did it. It was for once again, as I mentioned before, my own need.
Mhm.
And so far, I have not felt the urge to do anything with Kotlin whatsoever.
But this is
Uh,
strange a bit, right? I mean,
I don't think it is. It just
because you
there's
enjoyed Kotlin all the time, and now you're
yes,
back to Java, and you say,
but
okay.
that's kind of like my OCD kicking in. It's just I get really like kind of a horse with blinders on, and I get really really into something, and that's all I do, and then it goes away, and I might go back to it. So I put it on my belt as a tool, and when I have a need for it, I'll go back to using it. But right now, from what I'm doing, which is mostly open source stuff, is well, actually, everything is open source except for the stuff that I use for my own. But I don't have a need for it.
Mhm.
I do, if I was doing more Android stuff and so forth, I do see a need for that. There are definitely some
Yeah, and
very
Android is
nice.
different story, right? Because in
It's
Kotlin they have
it's
nothing. So
yeah,
before I use
it's
Java 8, I would use Kotlin, right? But if I have
yeah.
Java 21, it's different story, right?
Yeah, I mean, but even if you're gonna start a new Java project, use Kotlin. Don't use Java. I
Mhm.
mean, a new Android project. I mean,
Android, yeah,
don't.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But if you're gonna use if you're gonna create a Java project, uh, I I ended up taking that URL encoder and making a Kotlin multi-platform.
Mhm.
Some guy named Adam, no last name, actually helped me through the whole process because I wasn't really familiar. And I find that kind of cool.
Mhm.
It's kind of cool to have a library that you can use in JavaScript, you can use on Mac OS, you can use
This
it.
is a killer feature of Kotlin, I would say. The
Yeah,
multi-platform is something which is interesting.
and but it's early on. Also, they're working on the Kotlin compiler version 2.0, which is going to have more of the KMP, which is the Kotlin multi-platform, and KMM,
Mhm.
the Kotlin multi-platform mobile.
Mhm.
They're going to have more stuff there. So as I said, I think ultimately it comes down to the need. Right now, I don't feel I have a need to go to Kotlin. That may change,
Yeah.
but right now, I'm vested in Java. I mean, I've always been vested in Java, and it's just going back to it has been nice. I mean, it's been easy.
Mhm.
I don't have to look things up as much. I don't have to. There's a lot of pluses.
Mhm. I had similar conversation with Gerd, and Gerd said, "Okay, I have to talk to you because you are the Kotlin fanboy." So okay,
Yeah.
then I will talk to you. And the interesting part is, I explained Gerd what I'm doing with Java 21, and I said, "Okay,
Yeah.
I'm automating, everything, and I'm running, Java from source." And he listened and said, "Okay, this is exactly what BLD is."
That's exactly what it is.
This was for me. This is what this is completely interesting because you guys, you are nothing to do with Java. Usually you writing your own small utilities and software projects, and we met somehow in the middle,
Yeah.
and we do the same
I mean,
stuff from different perspectives. It's interesting.
so the BLD started with us on the Discord channel bitching about Gradle and Maven
Hmm.
and said, you know what, it sucks.
Hmm.
I'm like, I'm spending more time modifying my build file and updating my dependencies and that I'm doing writing code. And I have to go get a cup of coffee when Gradle is starting to compile something because it takes 3 days. You know, and
But for,
and
for
that's
me,
the
interesting. For me, Maven was perfect for application servers because I had the same template for everything.
yeah,
It was like one dependency. I could write it with closed eyes and I was
yeah,
done. The problem started in Java SE because right now I don't need a build tool if I don't have dependencies. I need nothing with modern
yeah,
Java, right? Because you have
true.
just a main method and you can do
Yeah.
whatever you like.
And now
And the
with
problem,
21, you can use the Java and the class name, and that's
yeah,
it.
and the problem is sometimes I need a single dependency. For instance, AWS SDK, Azure
Yep,
SDK. This is
yep.
one jar with dependencies. And
Yeah.
now I'm forced to use Maven. But now it is,
You,
or Gradle, whatever, because I
yeah.
have to, download the dependency, which usually ships with transitive dependencies. So it's
Yep.
not always that easy with -cp. The next thing is I would like to have one jar which is executable.
Yeah.
I could do it by hand without dependencies. With
Yep.
dependencies, I need Maven Shade plugin or whatever.
Yeah.
And this
Shadow
is where
shade. Yeah.
and this is where the problem starts because now my POM for one dependency is 10 times longer than all
Yeah.
my Java E days with no
Yeah.
50 lines of code because there was just one API and there were no dependencies because server did everything, right?
Yeah.
And this is my problem right now that for the simplistic projects, Maven configuration is orders of magnitude more complex than all the enterprise projects I did because I only had a single Java
Yeah.
8 usually API dependency, right?
But let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
What do you think the advantage of Maven versus Ant?
This I actually recently I had a chat on podcast with I think Nikolai, and I said End is actually pretty cool, actually, right? Because in
Yeah.
End you say Java C, this is like XML configuration, is not a problem, but this is like
Yeah.
steps and nothing else. The
Yep.
only advantage of Maven is, download the dependencies from Maven repository. Because,
Yeah.
back then to Ant days, I don't know whether they remember, we went, to homepage, SourceForge or whatever, we downloaded a jar, put in
Yeah.
directory and said, hey,
Directory.
Ant, this is
Well, you could use the IV plugin and use IV also.
and I never used Ivy with
Yeah.
Ant.
Yeah.
There was an you remember Ant Hill?
Yeah.
Ant Hill was the CI/CD, I think, right?
Okay. So the thing that came up right away when we were talking about conceptually,
Mm-hmm.
BLD, there was no code written or whatever, is
Mm-hmm.
that why do we need XML? Why do we need Groovy or whatever? How about just using the greatest language there,
Yeah,
Java?
yeah,
How about just using Java, which is what you're talking about, basically.
yeah.
What build does, what BLD
Hey,
does
should we do a cliffhanger and re-invite you back just for build talk?
yeah, we could do that. It's been an hour already, man. It just went by. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
definitely do that. Yeah.
because there will be 2 hours because we could cover, build from your perspective.
Sure.
So and make it, because I think a build is an interesting tool which could take off, because for a project like mine, it's just perfect, because I would even call, I'm using infrastructure as code right now in the cloud, and in build would be at build as code, because with build you could even ship build with your app. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You could have a main method which is yours, but you say, okay, this is the dependencies, and you can run your application from build. I mean, this is crazy, but if you think about this, is natural, right?
But I mean, the thing that people don't really understand until they try build is that it's not just limited to simple project.
Yeah,
I've converted over 60 different projects to it.
Yeah, but I cannot go, to big company and say, forget your entire CI/CD and use build. I don't.
You cannot.
Yeah,
I understand.
And you have problems. I would say for my enterprise project, Maven is just great. For my projects right now, Maven is okay, but I don't like the fact that the POM is longer for simplistic Java project than for my enterprise project. I don't like the idea, right? So this is the only thing. But this is. It works perfectly, but it's a little bit friction, Until I get the executable jar, I spent, 5 minutes, and I don't like to spend 5 minutes with copy and paste, right? So this is what I don't like. This is just, it doesn't feel right. And also, and if a newbie starts with Java, and I show him, her or him, my POM, with the Maven shade and shader, or there are two possibilities actually, and all these. Okay, you are crazy just to create a simple jar, right? But I could back then impress PHP developers with Maven build with single dependency and 35 lines of code. So this works perfectly, but now it's a little bit worse, right?
Yeah. All right.
And I have to say, you occupy almost my entire timeline in Blue Sky. You're hyperactive with your blog. It works too well. This is a nice movie reviews, and people should really follow you. This is a really nice things you are doing with your current blog.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of emulating the link blog a little bit by posting the stuff that I find interesting, and I posted to all the networks. So Twitter, X, and Mastodon,
everything automated, right?
Sky.
With
everything automated through my blog. It's just one click.
Yeah. And the last thing, to build a bot which automates for you. So there is just no more clicks, you just watch the entire thing from from your couch and see what happens, right? Cool. Right. I have to invite you back, but where people can find you, your blog, the article I will put to show notes you sent me. There's an article, how you migrated to Rife, for instance, was a nice one. Yeah. And
it's actually going to be published on Fouget tomorrow.
Hey, cool.
Yeah. So people can find me at eric.tauvin.net. That's THAUVIN. And on the network, on the social, I'm eTauvin, ETHAUVIN, on all of them.
Okay. And as a cliffhanger, if the listeners would like, to already prepare to the next episode, they should search for Rife and BLD. If they,
they should.
Yeah, and they will find, and they can play a little bit, and BLD can be even installed with Homebrew, right?
Actually, we all introduced it that you can install it with just a bash command, a single command.
Very good.
We just introduced that.
Yeah. Eric, it was the fastest hour ever. So and next time BLD.
Okay, sounds good.